Then in Vermont and elsewhere, this may seem parochial, but talk about H2-A dairy. We get H2-A workers, certainly apple pickers in our state has been traditional. They come up for a few months and all, and that's fine. You pick apples a certain time of the year. Dairy cows, you have to get milked year-round, as you know.
That's right.
And under current regulation, dairy farmers can't obtain H2-A workers for their farms, so you end up employing undocumented workers. I would like you to look at the H2-A rules, see how they might be changed, whether they should be changed, to help dairy farmers, help those farmers who want people on a year-round basis, and also take a look at whether that can be done administratively, even without a change in the law. Will you look at that?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to. You're exactly right. The H2-A is for temporary or seasonal workers, and because cows have to be milked every day, dairies don't qualify. On the other hand, it seems to me that we should be able to revisit this issue, and if we can't do something with and looking at this administratively, come back to you and say, we can't do it, Congress is going to have to act, this was what would fix the problem.
Thank you. And one other thing, and again, this is totally parochial. On Interstate 91 in Vermont, and I've raised the same questions with Secretary Chertoff and with others, the Customs and Border Protection have been operating a temporary immigration checkpoint on Interstate 91, not up by the border, some distance from the border, closer to Massachusetts. I've consistently asked, what's the reason for it? Agents were actually pulled off the border to be down there. It is a pain in the neck for Vermonters and others. And if I wanted to avoid it, there are about a dozen parallel roads that go down in New Hampshire and in Vermont that go straight down to the border that don't go on the interstate. I mean, you got something that's sort of semi-permanent. Everybody knows it's there. Can we at least look at this and give me some assurance that this, what I hope is a temporary aberration, does not become a permanent blight? I don't want to indicate by the nature of my question how I feel about it.
Thank you for that very neutral question, Mr. Chairman. Without talking about the I-91 checkpoint, we had a similar issue with the I-19 checkpoint in southern Arizona. I can give you the theory of an interior checkpoint, and it's several-fold. One is that you have to have a system in border areas and into the country from border areas, because you never catch everybody at the border. And in a way, what the interior checkpoint helps you figure out is how many people are actually getting through what you have, so you can adjust what you have. Secondly, at least the interior checkpoints I've been involved in, they're typically not alone. In other words, you may have the interior checkpoint, but it is coupled with other things that are going on around those side roads. And because people know who are coming in illegally, the knowledge passes pretty quickly about where there's a checkpoint, but it makes it easier to identify who's intentionally trying to evade the authorities, and that's not an uncommon law enforcement purpose. But third, I want you to know, Mr. Chairman, that I've said I want to see what the yield on these checkpoints is, and is this really the best use of the manpower and the dollars that we have for effective border enforcement, not just in Vermont but elsewhere. And so we are doing that now.
Okay, I appreciate that. And when Secretary Chertoff was here, and I hate to pick on him in his absence, but he was saying, knowing that I asked the question, he had a list, well, we found X number of people doing this, X number of people doing that, and we're able to get them. And I said, well, by that same theory, if you're coming in from Maryland or Virginia, you have to cross bridges into D.C. Hundreds of thousands of people come in every day. I'm one of them. You could have checkpoints there. I guarantee you'll find drugs. You find people on which are outstanding warrants. You will find some illegal immigrants. You'll also bring the city of Washington, D.C. to a screeching halt. And you have you have a traffic jam that will extend to Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and everywhere else. So you have to, I think there has to be some idea of what do we actually accomplish. Is the pain worth what we get? Is the pain worth the gain? And that's I think the question that has to be asked. And or are we better off using some of those same people and some of that same allocation of money on the border itself, and so that they can check on people? Now, we don't have a closed border between the United States and Canada. I can show you from Maine to Washington State, I can show you places where you could easily cross the border. I mean, you got huge areas, not just in Vermont, North Dakota, everywhere else. We want to be realistic about what we do. You can imagine how you could stop traffic into Detroit, for example. These are areas I think we have to be realistic. I'm not going to ask further questions. I see Senator Klobuchar back. I'll yield to her. And I've just been handed a note that Senator Sessions is coming back. And of course, we won't end this until he has a chance to ask further questions. Please go ahead, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as I said, that's exactly the analysis that we are performing internally. What is the yield for some of these techniques that we've been using?